is sculpture in motion.
In two words, would be motorcycle art.
A machine created by the Michelangelo of motorcycles.
If well designed, even a single piece of steel has a soul of its own.
A motorcycle with one of the most powerful engines ever created. A design that's constantly being refined in the search for just a little more horsepower.
2, 3. 3, okay, fine. It's what we wanted.
A sport bike owing its existence to the patriarch of Italian motorcycles.
When you ride the MV Agusta, you're riding a bike of passion, a bike of legends.
A legend first created by a royal Italian family. A legend that had passed into oblivion until a second Italian family took on the challenge of bringing the brand back to life. Why? Because this legend has always been based on a true love for motorcycles. Machines that are uniquely Italian, living, breathing works of art which carry the name MV Agusta. There is a timeless beauty to the northern Italian province of Varese. It is famous for the Sacro Monte di Varese, a place of pilgrimage and worship dating back to the year 1472. Today, the Sacro Monte lies in a national park, a designated historic treasure of the world. Varese is a place where tradition runs as deep as the rivers and lakes fed by the glacial waters from the Alps. Tradition that includes a unique connection between two Italian families and one remarkable motorcycle brand, MV Agusta. It is a tradition that began when a royal family decided to use its wealth and power to pursue its passion for motorcycles. The MV Agusta F4 312 is one of the kings of modern motorcycles. It is a bike that can trace its lineage all the way back to a Sicilian prince. That prince was Count Giovanni Agusta, who became famous as a pioneer of Italian aviation. He first flew in 1907, began building airplanes in 1923, and today the aviation company he created is still a major Italian helicopter manufacturer. But aviation wasn't enough for Count Agusta's sons, especially his son Domenico, who risked much of the family fortune to create a motorcycle company called MV Agusta. The M referring to Meccanica, Italian for mechanical, and V for Vergara, the northern Italian town where the company was born. The very first MV Agusta motorcycle was shown to the public in the fall of 1945. It was called the Vespa 98. Domenico Agusta didn't know that the name Vespa had already been registered by an Italian scooter company. And even though Domenico was now himself an Italian count, he was forced to change the name of his first motorcycle. The first MV Agusta was simply called the 98. Determined to make a name for his new company, Count Domenico wasted no time in taking MV to the races.
Se lei considera quello che ha fatto la MV Agusta in 25 anni di vittorie.
In the first 25 years that the Augusta family built motorcycles, to this day, no one has ever gotten close to the number of victories and successes the family had with the MV Agusta brand and their motorcycles.
MV's racing success was remarkable. Between 1952 and 1973, the company won 63 world championships. While the Augusta family continued to make money from its aviation division, racing motorcycles was its passion. It was a passion reflected by perhaps the greatest rider of all time, Giacomo Agostini. Starting in 1966, Agostini would capture 7 straight world championship titles, crystallizing the idea that if you wanted to be considered a world-class racer, you had to ride an MV Agusta.
Count Agusta was a little bit crazy. When there was a race, he would stop the assembly line for the helicopters at the last minute so all his engineers could focus on motorcycles and make sure the race bikes were finished in time for the races.
But with the death of Count Domenico in 1971, the company began to flounder. Augusta Aviation was still in business, but by 1975, MV Agusta was no longer making motorcycles. After 30 years in business, the MV Agusta factory is closed. The remarkable MV brand is officially dead. But MV Agusta is far from forgotten. What had been a family motorcycle company is bought by a second Italian family that also shares a love for motorcycles. In 1991, Claudio Castiglione and his son, Giovanni, buy the rights to the MV Agusta name. But can they bring a fabled brand that's been dead for more than 30 years back to life?
My ultimate goal was to make sure that when I brought back the MV Agusta brand, I brought it back with all the glory of the technology and the race history that represents MV Agusta. My goal was to leave people speechless.
Like father, like son. Giovanni Castiglione shares his father's passion for the MV brand. He understands the tradition of MVs as motorcycle art, but art that should be ridden and not simply put on display in the living room.
Our bikes are not a bike for the living room. They look like a bike from the living room, like a piece of art, a sculpture, but if you go on a racetrack, it's the fastest. If you go for a weekend, probably it's one of the most fun to drive bikes.
To bring the MV brand back to life, Claudio Castiglione turns to an old friend. His name, Massimo Tamburini, and he is one of the greatest motorcycle designers in the world. It's rare that the fate of an entire company is put into one man's hands. But Tamburini was up to the challenge, in part because his love of motorcycles has been a lifelong obsession.
My passion began when I was a child. I was born in 1943. In the town where I lived, there were only 2 men that owned a motorcycle. And I was able to distinguish one from the other just by the sound of the engines.
It was, in fact, the sound of engines that led Tamburini to become a motorcycle designer. In 1961, he attended the World Championship race at Monza, Italy. The sound of MV Agusta's racing engines captured his imagination, And from that day until now, he has dedicated his life to motorcycles. Remarkably, even though Massimo Tamburini is the grand master of Italian motorcycle design, he neither lives nor works in Italy. Massimo Tamburini makes his home below an ancient castle in San Marino. It seems an appropriate place for the temperamental artist, a man who guards his privacy with the same degree of passion he uses to create his designs. Founded in the year 301, San Marino is the oldest constitutional republic in the world. A landlocked little enclave 1/10 the size of New York City that is completely surrounded by Italy. This is where Tamburini has created a private design studio. It is at least a 4-hour drive from his studio to the MV Agusta factories, and cameras are rarely allowed inside. It is a building where Massimo Tamburini creates both magic and art. He can be stubborn, and he can be extremely temperamental.
First of all, you have to deal with the genius that we have here, that is Massimo Tamburini. So if you talk about the style and performance and how to connect, first of all, you have to work with him. It's not easy because he is the man who is going to ask you to design and redesign the same piece 10 times before he says, okay.
It is a style that Massimo Tamburini has been perfecting for a very long time. These are never-before-seen sketches from deep inside the vaults of his design studio. They show drawings of an iconic motorcycle Tamburini designed while working at Ducati, the Ducati 916. Then, when Massimo went to work at MV Agusta, he began drawing sketches to do the impossible. Create a new MV Agusta that is even more iconic and spectacular than the Ducati. Looking at his early sketches of the F4 provides an insight into Massimo Tamburini's creative soul and proof that the Michelangelo of motorcycles has always been a man well ahead of his time. These early sketches of the new MV Agusta were drawn years before they actually tried to build the bike. Finally, 7 long years after the Castiglione family buys MV Agusta, and after years of Tamburini sketching everything from individual parts to complete motorcycles, they show the world their new creation, a new MV Agusta named the F4. Virtually overnight, the F4 became one of the most lusted-after motorcycles ever created. The initial production run of 300 bikes sold out immediately to people like King Juan Carlos of Spain and world leaders in finance and fashion. The F4 was the ultimate modern sport bike, and with it, one of the oldest names in motorcycles, MV Agusta, was reborn. Massimo Tamburini's design philosophy for creating the new F4 can be described in a single word: perfection. He is a man who will not be hurried. He estimates the design and evolution of the F4 has taken him and his design team 60,000 hours. That's the equivalent of one man spending 30 years designing one motorcycle. It takes that long because Tamburini believes every single part of a motorcycle is important.
If you want to understand our philosophy, you must understand that we take the same amount of care with every single part, from the ones that are visible to the ones you cannot see.
Attention to every single detail is what makes an MV Agusta more than just a motorcycle, more than just an Italian motorcycle.
Every part is a piece of art. You know, they really approach every piece, all the forgings and every little thing. You know, when you work on an MV Agusta, if you take it apart, it just gets more beautiful.
To me, that's Italian. That's what Italians do so well. And I know a lot of my American friends, if we couldn't be American, we'd want to be Italian because of things like the MV.
What is also classically Italian is the relationship between Massimo Tamburini, the artist, and Claudio Castiglione, the patriarch of Italian motorcycles. A relationship based on mutual respect and each man's personal passion for motorcycles.
Il mio lavoro con Massimo, diciamo...
After working with Massimo Tamburini for 25 years, the only problem we have is that we each constantly want the best from one another. We are always searching for the best. It's a dream to work together with Massimo Tamburini.
A dream that gives Tamburini complete control in creating the bike that brings MV Agusta back to life.
We were absolutely free to create every single part of the motorcycle from scratch.
That freedom includes creating one of the hallmarks of the F4 design, an exhaust system that is pure beauty to both the eyes and the ears.
I thought that the mufflers should look like 4 organ pipes with different sizes, so that the exhaust sound would be like music to the ear. Castiglione was able to put me in contact with an organ maker to better understand the process we needed to undertake in order to achieve the results we wanted.
Tamburini is a remarkable man who takes a very classic approach to creating cutting-edge designs. While others in his studio use computers and 3D design software, Tamburini is most comfortable holding classic tools and gently bringing blocks of clay to life. He believes in artistic integrity for everything on a motorcycle. He takes great pleasure in his handcrafted rear support for the fuel tank, even though only a mechanic taking apart the bike would ever see it. And he's not afraid to turn a wrench, often personally testing his visions of how to build a better motorcycle to improve what already may have seemed perfect.
Whatever beauty is to you, he seems to be able to predict that. You know, he finds it. I mean, he really finds it, and that's the difference with Tamburini versus others. He's making shapes more than designing a product, almost.
While the Michelangelo motorcycle sculpts clay with hand tools, behind another normally locked door in his private studio, there's an entirely different approach to design. This is where a staff of 14 younger artists and engineers use a state-of-the-art computer system to bring the master's designs to life.
Un attimo quello che avevo indicato.
This is an example of a model that's having one of its parts modified. We're trying to reduce its weight, but keep the part just as strong. To do that, we're using a special engineering software that allows us to simulate how the new part would work in the real world. We can analyze and understand with great precision how the new part will perform before we ever make that part.
It is a full-blown race bike, disguised with lights and mirrors to make it look like a street bike. But it doesn't feel like a street bike when you ride it.
It's an amazing motorcycle. It's competitive, but the experience that you get from it is unlike anything else. It's burlier, it's just meatier, and it just, man, you get on it, it's hard, you're in a riding position. You know, half measures, unacceptable. You have to go. It wants to run.
The Scarana region of Italy, 45 miles north of Milan. Its provincial capital is Varese, often called the Garden City of Italian lakes. The city overlooks Lake Varese. Surrounded by alpine mountain ranges, the region is often described as the most beautiful province in all of Italy. Varese is also the home to the corporate headquarters for MV Agusta, It is here they debate the question, does MV need a second new motorcycle to survive? The answer is yes. In 2002, 4 years after introducing the F4, MV Agusta's legendary designer Massimo Tamburini continues the rebirth of the brand with a motorcycle called the Brutale. In classic Tamburini tradition, it is a full-out sport bike, but this design is stripped of its bodywork. The Brutale is a different type of motorcycle art, created for a different type of riding.
The Brutale is a bike more for everyday use. For the city, you can use it in the city, you can use it in the weekends. The F4 is a more proper race bike, just for the weekends.
From the very beginning, the Brutale is designed to be more than just a motorcycle used on a daily basis. Tamburini's intention is to blend art and real-world usability with performance. Today, the latest version of the bike is called the Brutale 910R, and in classic MV Agusta tradition, the R is short for race bike.
910R, I mean, just a beautiful balance of power, an incredibly quick chassis. There's still nothing soft about it. You know, you don't get on it and settle in. I mean, it's sport, you know, and that's what you get from MVs.
Like the F4, the Brutale's basic looks have not changed very much. But in typical MV fashion, over the years, the bike constantly gets more power. MV's latest version of a naked bike cranks out 134 horsepower and has a top speed of over 150 miles an hour.
The Brutale is a polarizing bike. People love it, or they just they don't like it at all, let's say. It's got the look of a street fighter. It gives you a nice upright riding position, nice big handlebars for leverage, see through traffic really well, yet it's got enough punch to be able to run with your buddies on the back roads.
With 2 successful models in production, in 2006, MV takes the next step when they introduce the ultimate expression of the brand, the F4CC. The CC being the initials of MV's patriarch, Claudio Castiglione. When it's released, it instantly becomes the most expensive production motorcycle in the world.
Io ho fatto una moto che,
My dream was to have a motorcycle that was a race bike that I could ride on the street.
The F4CC is about as exclusive as a motorcycle can get. Only 100 were built, and you could have bought one if you were willing to spend upwards of $150,000.
Sì, che abbiamo qui davanti, no?
If we talk about this model you see here, it costs the hefty price of 100,000 euros. This is not the result of the delirium of some madman. But when you understand the product and the process to make it come to life, it all makes sense. The latest model was dedicated to our president, even though at first he did not want to accept that honor.
Product and the process in creating the F4CC meant crafting more than 90% of its parts by hand. Combining special all-black paint with expensive bare carbon fiber. The F4CC also has what's called a torque shift system, developed for MV race bikes. That system keeps the bike's 190 horsepower engine from spinning the rear wheel out of control.
The funny thing is that the commercial name of this feature is a TSS, which is torque shift system. But honestly speaking, this is not true. This is just for the outside. For the insiders, the T comes from Tamiazzo, who is the name of the guy who really was the inventor of this system. So that's also funny, I think.
These days, any bike that wears the MV badge shares a unique 4-cylinder engine design that was first developed in 1998. The original version produced 120 horsepower. The current version of the same engine design can crank out more than 180 horsepower.
Our engine is like an orange, and you squeeze, you squeeze, you squeeze, but you always have some juice.
Non abbiamo praticamente mezzi automatici di montaggio.
This is where the engine is born. All the assembly is done manually. We do not use any machines to assemble the parts.
The original design for the MV four-cylinder was in part engineered by Piero Ferrari, the son of Enzo Ferrari. And like Ferrari, MV heats the aluminum cylinder heads in what they jokingly refer to as a high-tech pizza oven. The MV recipe calls for 1 hour at precisely 374 degrees, which expands the metal ever so slightly. The result is a perfect installation and fit for the engine valve guides.
Testa praticamente è uscita dalla macchina, dalla Heller, con le prime
The cylinder head casting is heated. The guide slips in easy, and when it cools, it's locked in place. And this machine is actually putting the valve guides into the cylinder head at the moment.
Dove avviene l'ultima fase del processo produttivo. Tutti I pezzi vengono controllati.
This is the final quality control check. This machine is going over different measurements. It's basically a multi-dimensional axis. It has a ball point on the end. That point has gone over every nook and cranny and is building a 3D model. That 3D model has to match the computer drawing so that we know that everything exactly matches what the machined pieces are supposed to be.
The laser measuring system is accurate down to 1 micron. That's 1/25,000th of an inch, or 75 times thinner than a single strand of human hair. Much too small to be seen by the naked eye.
Vengono assemate le teste, dove vengono premontate le valvole,
In this area, basically, there's the sub-assembly of the cylinder head, the final assembly of the springs, valves, and the connecting rods. The sub-assembly for the transmission, or the cassette-style gearbox, which is unique to MV Agusta, is also done in this area. The final components are then brought over to the motor assembly line.
What makes the gearbox unique is that it can be removed from the bike in one piece, making it much easier to change gear ratios for different track or riding conditions. Each MV engine is virtually hand-built, and each technician has as much time as it takes to get the work done. It is a quintessential Italian attitude. This is not a typical factory. It is a place where artisans create art, and art cannot be hurried.
We do not do anything in a hurry. There are really no time limits. Every person is given the time they need to do their job.
In large mass-produced motorcycle factories, an entire bike can be built in 1 hour. At MV Agusta, it takes 11 hours just to build one engine, and that's on a good day. The focus isn't on how long it takes to build the engine. The focus is on how well the engine performs once it's finished. The final step in the engine assembly plant is to run the new motor, and run it hard.
Processo produttivo, tutti I motori vengono collaudati al 100% su questi banchi.
At the end of the assembly process, all the engines are tested 100% on testing tables. We have an automatic procedure. The operator places the engine on a cart. There are different steps of the testing procedures where the engine is run from minimum to maximum power, and we verify all the main parameters of the engine. We keep a database for each engine where we store all the information for every motorcycle, including the old ones. We have all the performance data for every engine we build.
Finished engines are taken crosstown by trucks to the Casanetta factory, where final assembly takes place.
The assembly starts when the new engines arrive here. Every 2 hours, there is a shuttle that transfers the engines and carries them here to the final assembly line.
The first thing they do on the final assembly line is to give each new motorcycle its own vehicle identification number. They use a special machine that works like a dot matrix computer printer, except this printer prints on steel.
The frame is brought here and placed on this machine that takes care of stamping it with the ID number. Here we have sheets with barcodes that establishes the daily production. So the operator accurately follows the daily process and production schedule.
A special clear coat sealer is applied over the new engraving and then stickers added. There's one final check to make sure all the identification numbers are the same. With that necessary formality completed, it's time to build the bike. Each new bike will be followed down the assembly line by a special yellow cart. The cart is actually the design of engineers from Porsche.
From here, the real assembly line begins. The cart and the motorcycle are placed onto the line, one after the other, and the final assembly process begins.
Each cart holds all the pieces needed to build one particular bike. The carts make the assembly line remarkably efficient. At MV, they can build whatever model they want, whenever they want it.
We can mix one Brutale, one F4, one Claudio Castiglioni. In principle, in principle. Dicevo, questo è l'inizio della catena.
This is the beginning of the assembly line. In this section, we mount the suspension, which includes the handlebars and the front brakes. We also install the bike's electrical system. For each station, there is one person. We prefer to keep one person at the same station, even if they are capable of working on other parts of the assembly line. We think that it improves quality and safety.
There are 16 main stations along the final assembly line, compared to as many as 50 at mass-produced motorcycle factories. And it takes more time for the final assembly line at MV Agusta, about 4 hours per bike compared to an hour at larger motorcycle companies.
Here, we put in place and fit the remaining electrical components. We mount the headlight and the dashboard, and we put on the chain. There is no rushing or time restrictions, because we want to make sure that people have enough time to do their job properly.
più avanti.
Here we can see the motorcycle with more pieces added, including the radiator and cooling system. It may seem that the first phases of final assembly are the most difficult because there's a lot of parts being assembled. What's harder to see are the later phases of building the bike, when we focus on checking that everything has been properly installed. Those checks are very complex and highly detailed.
La moto qui è finita. La moto viene scaricata e viene portata.
This is the end of the assembly line process where the motorcycle is complete. A very important process for us is the identification paperwork that goes along with the motorcycle. At every step, each employee who works on the bike has to stop and sign a quality control form.
This technician uses a dynamometer, a special machine that measures engine power and performance to run each new bike through its paces. Once the technician is satisfied, he too will sign his name to the checklist. For most companies, this is the last step in the process, but not at MV Agusta, where personal pride and passion are forever linked with an obsession for perfection.
Proprio l'ultimissima fase che viene in questa azienda.
Technically, the new motorcycle is ready to ship, but there is one more important step. We call it cold quality control. Another person who had no part in building the bike looks it over as one last check. It is another set of eyes looking for any imperfections or anything else that may have happened during construction but was not caught on the actual assembly.
Unlike most factories where finished motorcycles slip quietly out back doors almost unnoticed, at the Casanetta factory, all the new bikes sit proudly on display right inside the front doors. It's almost as if the factory staff wants one last chance to admire their work before the bikes leave the factory.
I think that everybody that works in this company, on the production line, they don't feel like a worker of a production line, but they feel like a craftsman, how do you say in English? Like, how do you say, artigiano?
Artisan.
Artisan, yeah, artisan. That's the way they feel.
This is a rare look inside the Research and Development Department for MV Agusta. It is here where they think about both the future and the past.
So this is the place where everything was born since the beginning.
This is also the place where constant improvements are made to MV Agusta's engine design. When first introduced, the F4 engine produced 120 horsepower. Today, it makes well over 180 horsepower. That's a tremendous change, but the power increases actually happen in very small increments. Individual changes to the engine often add just 2 or 3 horsepower at a time. It's a constant, ongoing process to squeeze just a little more juice from their unique 4-cylinder engine.
The last 2 years, we got a lot of horsepower, something like 8 horsepower per year, which is a lot. Now we are at about 182. I think that for a 1000 cc, it will be very difficult to go after 186, 188. But maybe in a couple of years it will be different and it will be more.
This may look like a computer representation of global weather patterns, but it's actually the result of a flow bench, a special machine that measures how air flows through an engine. MV Agusta uses a unique type of valve system inside each cylinder, and how the engine breathes is critical.
We can test everything we want, different angles, different layouts of valves. And for example, in this solution, this is better here where you see the green continuous, which means that the flow is good enough and the valves are not making any interference. The most important thing is to find the right balance between the flow here and the flow close to the wall.
They've changed the valve angle by 1/10 of a millimeter, 1/254th of an inch. They hope this tiny change will squeeze out a little more juice.
This is the final answer because, of course, flow bench is important, but you always, at the end, you always need to measure the power in the dyno room. When you are at a certain point, you cannot think to gain 10 horsepower at a time. It's good to see 2, 3, and probably this is what we are going to see. I hope. Three. Okay, fine. It's what we wanted.
The minor change, giving the engine 3 more horsepower, will quickly find its way into the assembly line.
Let's face it, MV makes a lot of horsepower. The thing runs so hard. I mean, you get a little careless with the throttle, front wheel's off the ground.
There's something about the way it's tuned, just like an instrument. And there's something about the way that the bike is tuned that allows it to, it projects into your helmet more. There's something about the intake noise that it makes. You crack a throttle on an MV that's singing a different song. It really is.
Questa è una domanda molto seria.
Why is this area of Italy so motor crazy? That is a very serious question. There's something in this area. It's the passion, the people's passion.
Northern Italy has always been a home to a unique fascination with engines. Ferrari, Lamborghini, and Maserati are just a few of the brands that call this region home. But at MV Agusta, there's something else that keeps the drive going. The belief that motorcycles have a soul, and to create them is a work of pure passion.
Quando io sono sulla moto.
When I am riding a motorcycle and it does what comes to my mind the moment I think it, it is almost like speaking with a human being. Our product is not designed for the average person. We feel the same way Count Augusta felt. He didn't build motorcycles to make money. He created MV Agusta because of his pure passion for bikes. We share that passion for our motorcycles.
The perfect place to experience the passion of an MV Agusta is on a private test track not far from the factory in the hills above Varese. Here, the feelings and emotions of riding an MV Agusta are instantly apparent.
E oggi siamo qui concentrati.
We are focused on a product that is not indispensable in a person's life, but is meant to give strong emotions, as I always say, just by sitting on it and touching its parts. Understanding the high quality of the motorcycle, even to those who are not experts.
It feels special to ride. It's just this hairy-chested beast, you know? I mean, it feels so purposeful. Everything on it's hard, immediate. There's effort required, rider participation. It asks a lot of you, but it gives back.
There is another remarkable thing about MV Agusta. Unlike other brands that keep bringing out new models every year or two, MV's F4 seems like a timeless design. Its shape hasn't changed since its introduction in 1998. Instead, MV's focus has been on constantly increasing power and performance.
Quindi questa è una domanda molto interessante.
We need to maintain the focus, the core point, and that core point is to have this grand imagination of a motorcycle based on technology and performance.
That continued focus will be on motorcycles as art forms, mechanical sculptures at speed. Machines that combine Italian art and craftsmanship with passion. The MV Agusta brand is uniquely tied to northern Italy, a region of timeless beauty, a place where people have a marvelous appreciation for all the good things in life, a place where two different families shared a unique passion for motorcycles. One family created the MV Agusta brand. The second family has brought it back to life.
When you're born in a family like this, your biggest passion is motorcycle. We have a very good relation. We are friends more than father and son. Passion for the bikes, passion for other things that I wouldn't say in the TV, but we have really great